101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a top plaintiff lawyer in high stakes trials, managing partner at Greenberg Gross LLP, no other than Mr. Brian Williams.
Thank you for having me today.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Brian, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. As you mentioned, I'm a lawyer. I work at a law firm called Greenberg Gross. I'm the managing partner, and I myself spend my time in a courtroom trying cases. We're a law firm that's based in Southern California. We have offices in Orange County and Los Angeles, and we also practice in Las Vegas and in New York City. We represent survivors of childhood sexual assault. We represent survivors of nursing home and elder abuse. And then we also represent a lot of employees who are harmed in the workplace, such as, through discrimination or harassment or retaliation, things of that sort.
Mr. Brian, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. And today, let's talk about one of your colleagues' book, Defeating Darkness. Can you tell us about it?
Sure. So this book is written by Heather Brown. Heather Brown is a lawyer in my firm. Heather is a former prosecutor for the Orange County District Attorney's Office. Essentially, she spent her 20 plus year career putting bad people behind bars, including prosecuting a number of molesters or childhood sexual offenders in Orange County. She also, progressed up to murderers and homicides, things of that sort. When she retired from practicing criminal law, I lured her into the civil arena, which is where I practice in, and she helps us pursue our civil cases for monetary damages against institutions that enable abuse. So, whether that's a church, a school, an after-school facility, a sporting, event, something like that, that those institutions that fail in their obligations that lead to children being abused. And Heather uses her experience as a prosecutor to help our clients kind of navigate them through the criminal process as well as the civil process. And she wrote this great book, which is really meant to kind of give survivors and their family members a bird's eye view of what might happen should they choose to pursue, their case through the legal system.
Mr. Brian, the title speaks of reclaiming power. How do you define this for survivors, and why is it central to your
Sure.
approach?
No, great question. So, a lot of survivors of childhood sexual abuse take years to come forward, some decades, and some a lifetime, unfortunately. And what leads survivors to maintain their secret and stay quiet a lot of times are feelings of things like shame or guilt or embarrassment or concern that they won't be believed. And what Heather's book does, and what we as a firm try to do, is empower those survivors so that they realize that their voice matters, that people will believe them. And if they come forward and they pursue action, either through the criminal system or the civil system or both, that they can actually not just help themselves and recover and heal from their own abuse, but empower others to come forward. And the more people that come forward and reveal the systemic problem of sexual abuse, the more likely it is that society can address it, make changes, and prevent it from happening in the future.
Very well said, Mr. Brian. Very well said. Let's understanding the institutional betrayal and systemic barriers. What are the most common ways schools and institutions fail survivors of sexual assault based on the book?
Sure. So I think if you're talking about schools, I think if I put it simply, it's improper supervision or inadequate supervision. I think that, there's probably not enough employees who are spending enough hours in his or her day actually paying attention to how, you know, not just teachers, but custodians, coaches, assistants within the school, how they're spending their time with children, whether they're spending an inordinate amount of time with a specific child, whether they're isolating that child and giving them preferential treatment. We call it grooming, basically engaging in behaviors that would show just an excessive amount of time by one individual employee with one student or perhaps a group of students. So I think the biggest problem facing schools is not supervising well enough. And then when they do notice things, they don't say enough. Employees at a school are mandatory reporters under the law. They're required to report any suspicion of sexual abuse. But even though they're well trained and they know those are requirements, many don't report. They wait until they have positive proof. And at that point, it's too late. They need to do a better job of reporting what I call red flags, things that just don't seem right.
Yes, indeed. If there's a red flag, people, please report them. Mr. Brian, how does institutional denial or cover up culture perpetuate sexual violence, and what can be done to disseminate them?
Again, two great questions in there. I'll try to answer them one at a time. So, in terms of what they do, they, I mean, they don't prevent it, and when they, worse yet, when they know something is going on, perhaps there's one employee that's doing something wrong, they don't do anything about it, and at times they even take affirmative action to cover it up. What that does, the problem that that creates, is that it empowers that perpetrator, and that perpetrator becomes more emboldened and more brazen, and unfortunately more severe in terms of what abuse they perpetuate. So if you are a pedophile working at a school, as an example, or a church, and you have realized through personal experience that your employer isn't going to stop your illegal behavior, you're just going to feel empowered and you're going to keep doing it and doing it and doing it over again. So I think that's the biggest problem. What needs to happen is those institutions need to do better and they need to change. And one of the things that we try to do at our law firm is force them to change. If you're an institution, a big institution, say it's a private school or a very popular and well-funded church, one of the best ways to force meaningful change that will protect the next generation of kids is to hold them accountable civilly. You can hurt them in their pocketbook, so to speak. And unfortunately, that's one of the only ways at times you can get their attention. And so if a civil lawsuit is filed by my firm or any other firms that practice in this area, one of our primary goals is to force through that civil lawsuit, not just them compensating the individual survivor that was harmed, but to force them to create new policies, new procedures, so that, again, the next generation of kids are better protected.
Indeed, let's protect our next generation because they are hope for our generation to come. What systemic gaps or criminal justice process does the book expose and how can be addressed?
So, I don't think the focus of the book is to highlight the failings of our criminal justice system because, while it's not perfect in the United States, I'd like to think we do have, if not the world's best, one of the best criminal justice systems out there. I think what it does do, though, is highlight that, you know, courts are crowded. There are not enough courtrooms, there's not enough judges, and criminal justice takes far too long. And there's a saying that justice delayed is justice denied. So, what I think it does point out to survivors going through either a criminal proceeding or a civil proceeding is that you have to be patient. You have to be willing to work through those judicial delays that are not the fault of the judge. The judge wants to clear his or her, list of cases quicker as anybody else, but there's just so many of them that have to be handled through a district attorney's office in the criminal procedure, that at times delays occur. So I think it does, as opposed to expose, I would say is more just empowers and gives some transparency to survivors so that they know if they enter this justice system process and they pursue their case either through civil justice or criminal justice or both, they just need to be patient. I think another thing that is discussed briefly in the book and certainly a lot out there on the internet is that in the criminal system, plea bargains are an issue. Um, Deals are made. Deals are made in civil cases too. And again, the book is not necessarily casting blame or saying that deals are a bad thing. It's more providing transparency for those involved in that process so they know before they go into it what to expect.
Indeed. So let's talk about the survivor's journey, stories, and strategies. What are the critical first steps a survivor should take after an assault, before, or both emotional and legally?
Sure. So, great question. First and foremost, speak up. And that's the hardest thing to do. They've suffered something that no child should have to go through, and they don't necessarily always know how to process it. What we urge is tell someone, tell your friend, tell your parents, tell your teacher if you have a trusted teacher, some confidant who then as an adult can take over in the situation, because a child shouldn't have to navigate their way through such a ordeal in a legal proceeding. Oftentimes our clients, while they're children when they're deposed, by the time they come to us are adults, so we can have a more sophisticated conversation with them. But speaking up first and making that brave step to tell someone what happened to you is the first choice. And I think, in terms of justice, reporting it to authorities, it the person that abused the survivor needs to be held accountable. And the best way to do that is by reporting it to police, child protective services, some, law enforcement agency who can take immediate steps to make sure that that perpetrator is not a danger to someone else.
Yes, people, be brave and speak up. If you need help, please do ask for help. How can survivors navigate the emotional toll or pursuing justice while healing?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I think that journey is different for each individual survivor that I represent. Certain clients follow a certain pattern, certain different clients follow something else. But the most important thing is to know that when you start that journey with a law firm like ours, and again, we're not the only ones to do this, is that you're going to have the support all along the way. We're going to be there with you and we're going to guide you. The first thing I think that's important once you've taken that step forward and revealed what happened to you is to seek professional help. Sexual abuse causes profound emotional and psychological impacts on a person, and it's hard to navigate those by yourself. And there are specific trauma informed and trauma guidance counselors out there who can help. They can provide the right kind of therapy, the right kind of treatment to help create. You can't make it go away what happened, but you can create coping mechanisms and other things that help that survivor get through trigger points in life and difficult times that they're undoubtedly going to face.
Mr. Brian, let's talk about the legal and practical guidance. What are the most powerful legal tools or strategies survivors can use to hold perpetrators and institutions accountable?
Sure. So again, so on the criminal side, you call the police, they get the district attorney involved, and you work with the district attorney. On the civil side, your options are you hire a lawyer is usually the first step. It's a pretty daunting process to handle on your own, but you do have choices in the civil arena. Some survivors like to pursue their civil justice what I'll call informally, meaning without filing a lawsuit. They like to bring their matter to the attention of the institution in which they were abused and see if some agreement can be reached that basically precludes those parties from ever having to be engaged in litigation. Other survivors or ones that might try that informal approach, but they then find themselves in a formal lawsuit. And through your lawyer, you file your case against the appropriate defendants that can include the individual perpetrator involved. But most typically in our situation, also the institution that enabled that abuse to occur. Again, baseball programs or after school events, churches, schools, daycare facilities, places like that. And it's a litigation can be scary. It's a long process. It typically takes quite some time, but you're doing it with a lawyer that does it every single day, and we will help guide you through that process.
Yes, guiding through that process. What's one piece of legal advice you wish every survivor knew before reporting assault?
One piece of legal advice. I get, that's a great question. I think what I would say is eliminate the fear in coming forward. Despite what you might be feeling having gone through such a horrific event, people will believe you, people will support you. There is no shame in reporting. In fact, it's the opposite. You transform from being a victim to a survivor by coming forward and going on your path towards recovery. Um, so go through that process, obviously with the appropriate amount of apprehension, but knowing that, with a strong advocate on your side, you will get through it. Um, and if you go strictly from a case preparation standpoint, the one thing I say is to document as much as you can. Memories fade over time, particularly with traumatic events like this. The closer in time you can document what occurred to you, tell other people, keep regular, any pertinent documents, whether those are emails or text messages or something that might document the abuse, keep those things because, a lawyer or a district attorney down the line is really going to need them and it helps the case become much easier.
Mr. Brian, as a managing partner and a top plaintiff lawyer, what are your short term and long term goals?
Short-term goals, help the clients that we already have. Obviously, my job is to be a counselor through law, right? And help my individual clients obtain the justice that they come to me to seek, which again, I'm limited. I can't put people behind bars, but I can help them seek civil justice. Um, Long-term goals is expanding our practice so that our practice can help as many people as possible throughout the United States. We started primarily in California. We opened a office in Las Vegas a couple years back that is doing great and growing at a very rapid pace. And as we are doing this podcast, I'm trying to find more office space and larger office space in New York, with the idea of helping more people on the East Coast. So I guess long-term goals, Daniel, just to keep doing what we're doing successfully on behalf of people that need it, but being able to expand so that we can help more people.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Brian, and hoping for more success. Let's talk about fighting back, advocacy, and institutional change. What are the most effective ways for communities to pressure schools, institutions to prioritize sexual assault prevention and response?
Yeah, to be heard. What I mean by that is, schools and institutions respond to attention, right? And they don't necessarily like adverse attention or negative attention that might be associated with something like lack of supervision that led to sexual abuse. So don't stay quiet. In today's society, there's ways to get the community talking about this type of ill behavior through the social media, through showing up at school board events so that the elected officials that run schools know about the problem and they have to listen and deal with it. But speaking out, there's a lot of community-based organizations or advocacy groups that would love to have information about wrongdoing in certain situations so that they can use their voice to help that community knowledge perspective. So speaking up, telling as many people as you can, and using all the technological advances that we have nowadays with, instant messaging and Facebook and TikTok and everything else to expose wrongdoing.
What policies or laws would you prioritize to create safer schools and workplaces?
Great question. So there's a lot of them, right? I think with if we're talking about childhood sexual abuse first and foremost, I think the legal changes that have to continue to occur, and I say that because they've already started, particularly in some states, is expanding the statute of limitations that allows people to come forward and pursue civil actions. Because again, many individuals who suffer this kind of trauma wait years or decades. And if it's too late for them to bring a lawsuit by the time they're ready to do so, then that prohibits them from seeking the justice they deserve. Talk about employment rights. That's another great area. It's an area that we focus in, and what exists in the workplace is a tremendous power differential. Meaning, a company has a lot of power and influence over their employees, and the ability to quiet employees who are trying to speak up when they see wrongdoing, whether that's sexual harassment, whether that's unsafe work practices, and whatnot. And so the more states and legislatures realize that you have to enact laws that take that power imbalance and level it out so that the employee can have the freedom and the safety and the security to actually report wrongdoing to their employers or to an outside agency without fear of being punished or terminated, the better.
Yes, indeed. And very well said, Mr. Brian. Beautifully articulated. Let's talk about prevention and cultural shift. How can we educate young people about consent and power dynamics before harm occurs?
Yeah. I think if you're young people, I think it has to begin with parents, to be honest. I think, as I have 4 kids of my own, and in the line of work I am, you can imagine I have regular discussions with them, checking in on specific things that I see on a regular basis. But not every parent has the benefit of my, you know, unfortunate experiences in terms of having to help my clients through these times. But what Heather's book, Defeating the Darkness, does is give insights to parents and other teachers. It's actually a chapter directed to teachers to read in terms of things that they should do and they should look out for so that they appreciate the red flags, the warning signs. So I think it's really an awareness campaign, Daniel, that the more people who have an understanding of the telltale signs of childhood sexual abuse within a school or even employee or being mistreated in the workplace, the more people in society will be, you know, able to recognize those things, point them out to the individual being harmed, or in the appropriate circumstance, report them to the necessary authorities to stop them. So it's all about education. There's a wealth of information out there on, Google if you want to find out, signs and symptoms and things to look for in this context with AI advancements. You can ask ChatGPT nowadays and other AI services, and they'll answer that question for you. But become as knowledgeable and familiar with the topic as you can so that when you do see behavior, you know that it's something that you need to be concerned about.
Indeed, people, let's be knowledgeable in everything. Ignorance excuse no one. What role do bystanders or bystanders play in prevention, and how can they be empowered to
Yeah.
intervene?
Yeah, bystanders play a huge role. So, again, if I go to the example that we've been using a lot, Daniel, which is schools, I have a lot of cases where I end up finding after the fact that a teacher aide did see something, for example, that they knew was wrong, but or they thought might not be appropriate, but they just didn't say anything. Or maybe an assistant coach saw the coach doing something that he or she just didn't feel comfortable coming forward. So bystanders are vital to the process. They need to speak up. And I think having that power and courage to speak up is a process of training them to do so. Meaning it's my hope that in today's age, every school in the United States, I'm sure this doesn't happen, but every school in the United States for a new hire should be training their employees what they need to be looking out for. And if you notice red flags or anything that seems, you know, not normal, that here's the reporting mechanism. And you can do it anonymously, you can not do it anonymously, you can do so without fear of being retaliated against or somehow, having your job influenced by it. But they need to be trained upon hire to speak up when they see those things.
Yes, indeed. Before we wrap up our discussion for today, Mr. Brian, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and of course my book 101 review in fifth season, comedy 101 in second season, food 101 in its fifth season as well, geography 101 and love letters and third season, and my baby podcast, mental health 101, a movie 101 review and music 101 in its fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Mr. Brian, what message do you most want readers, survivors, allies, or institutions to take from defeating the darkness?
That there's always hope, to be hopeful, to be joyful, to find joy in life. And you've obviously been through a very traumatic event, but through, you know, there are ways to make things better. There are ways to feel empowered to help other survivors out there to There are ways to go on your own path towards healing, but more importantly, as Heather describes in her book, as she herself is a survivor of abuse, there's a way to take what happened to you and actually help the next generation of kids to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Mr. Brian Williams, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support the book as well as your business itself?
Sure. So the easiest way is you could go to our firm's website, which is www.ggtriallaw.com. We also have a website focused on our sexual assault practice group. It's fightforsurvivors.com. You get a free copy of the book there. And those would be the two best ways.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Brian Williams because if you support them, more and more and more empowering people to come. So, Mr. Brian, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.